Alrighty, everybody, welcome in. My name is Joe, and today we're going to play some chess. I am secretly hoping to get some kind of King's Indian in, just like we've been talking about in our intro to chess conversations. We'll see what my opponent plays. And yes, indeed, they're going to give us that opportunity. So, Queen's Pawn. We lead off with the Knight. There's no danger here, so we're going to push our pawn, get this structure set up, ready to go. So a knight to the outside, what dangers are there? Well, if the knight ends up here, that's kind of meh. I'm not in love with it, but I don't hate it right now, so I'm just going to keep developing. Notice this and this are teaming up. We can always capture here. Let's go ahead and push this, our King's Pawn Breaker. We don't need to yet. We're just going to go ahead and get it ready. I'm debating on taking with my King Pawn, and I know that's not a good thing. So you know what? I shouldn't. I should just stick with the principles. Stick with the principles. We've got our King's Pawn Breaker ready to go. Notice we have a double attack here. My opponent does have pressure along this outside pawn. I should castle at this point in time. The question is, do I get greedy and go for the pawn? This does come with an attack down here. So my candidate moves now are to castle, grab the pawn. If I grab with the knight, where can the knight rotate back to? I think the knight is better where it is. So let me just grab a pawn. It's stopping my opponent from castling. I don't know if that's an important detail or not. Simply because my opponent could castle queenside. They've already got this kind of broken up pawn structure. So my opponent's looking to remove the defender and undefend this pawn, this bishop. So we're just going to go ahead and rotate back. And now the threat is removed. I'm just going to go ahead and castle now. I might even look at sticking, I might even look at sticking the bishop along this long diagonal to stop castling. Let's see. Ready for a central pawn break. See if we can get this center opened up a little. That dark square bishop would have been that dark square bishop is going to be nice to have on this nice long diagonal here. So my opponent now has defended twice. Technically, I do too. Everything I have is defended. So that doubled pawn we have is now gone. So the debate here is, do I trade queens? And I think the answer is yes. I would like to not trade queens, but if I don't, that doesn't really help me the way I want it to. So let's go ahead and just trade up these queens. Do I have any kind of check or anything? No, not really. And let's just trust ourselves that we have the bishop pair, and so we're going to be okay. These two isolated pawns could be an issue at some point in the future. We could start with more trades, but I really don't want to trade off both of my bishops just yet. Actually, I like this because it brings this central pawn closer and gives me an isolated, defended passed pawn. Right, these are all isolated, and if I can bring this guy over closer, yeah, I hate to give up that light square bishop, but now, unfortunately, do you see what just happened here? By moving that pawn, my opponent undefended something. We go back to talk about principles of chess. Over-defend, over-defend, over-defend. This has been undefended. So I'm going to grab here. I just have to look to make sure I'm not missing any tactics. So if my opponent brings over, my bishop would be sitting there. Bishop is no longer defended. Have to retreat it. Have to take. These are still defended. We are good. So let's go ahead and pick up our material. Oh, I just noticed my opponent is has a provisional rating, so we don't exactly know what their actual rating is yet. They just haven't played enough games on Lichess to get that rating. That's normal. It happens. So now, yep, we know this is undefended. We know that we can still retreat. We can still retreat, and then we have this. And now we see the power of the bishops. And unfortunately, my opponent's going to end up losing more material here. This pin, the best thing they can do is to try to defend one of these, and I don't see an easy way to do that without giving up more material. So rook for rook for rook with check. I'll take it. I think my opponent wanted me to capture up so that he could capture down, and then I end up with check. We can... Is there any way for my opponent to get out? Yeah, let's go ahead and pick up the knight. And now we've just got way too much material here. Let's see, we've got this covered, we've got this we can get covered, we lose this. So let's just go ahead and bring our rook over to this open file. Cut off our opponent's king so they can't enter the game. We'll start to bring our king into the game. I don't really need this check. I'm just going to move this pawn out of the way. We're just slow rolling this. There's no rush. So this comes with check. It's a protected check. We'll swing back and pick up. And there's literally nothing my opponent can do now because my king can gobble everything up. My opponent is not in stalemate. We can... There is a way to checkmate with both of these, but I'd have to have my rook right here, and I'm not smart enough to do all that, so I'm just gonna continue the cleanup process. There is literally nothing my opponent can do. Just don't want to end up at a stalemate, so I want to always make sure my opponent has options. And this is cleanup. We push, we create a rook or queen. I mean, like I said, there are ways to checkmate your opponent with a bishop and two rooks, or a rook and two bishops plus a king. We'll go back to that. We're going to... If you are playing and you're new to the game, don't leave. Don't leave. Just, that's what this button is for. It says resign. Just resign. All right, so let's go back. All the way back to here real quick, because I want to look up a checkmating pattern from here. Notice that the opponent, right now, there is the possibility of mate if I get my bishop here and my opponent goes this way, but they can't. So I would have to, I'd have to get here, I believe. I'm not going to make you guys suffer through me on the checkmate pattern. We're just going to look at it. I have to study this. Yeah, there's a checkmate here. I wonder if it's... Yeah, all the way back here even, there's a forced checkmate. Bishop captures on c5, whatever the knight does. Bishop captures on d4, whatever the knight does. King has to move. Rook captures on d8. Bishops to c4 with check. So let's just follow the fastest checkmate pattern and see if we can figure it out. Notice now the king has only one move. And then, yeah, bring the bishop to here to cut off both of these. Eventually, this bishop will be here to cut off both of those. And then the rook is going to slide down for checkmate. Yeah, so notice the king now has 0 moves the king can make. So the opponent plays a nothing move. No, we can't do that because this is not defended. Rook to b8, get to the open file, which allows the opponent's king to move. And now if we look at what these guys are covering, we create a wall right here. And as long as the king can't go past this wall, the rook slides up for checkmate. So that's the checkmate pattern. The king can only wiggle back and forth, and we've got this checkmate. Interesting, interesting, interesting. So those are the checkmate patterns that I need to learn better. And so from here, I just got, yeah, this rook slide up. This is just for generic principles. We're just cutting our opponent's king off so they can't ever enter the game. I should have used my bishops and just narrowed down the king's scope. Just constantly use them to narrow down the king's scope. But, I mean, there's nothing here for my opponent, unfortunately. All right, let's go back to the very, very, very beginning, and let's look at our King's Indian defense that we got to set up. I don't know this move. And if we look at the pale face attack, it is known as. Interesting. Yep, never heard of it. Knights on the edge are dim. Knights on the rim are dim. Knights to the edge are dead. They are reducing their scope. So we look at what this knight can do versus a knight in the center of the board, which can reach all of this. So a knight on the edge is a little dim because you're taking away valuable real estate for it. We got into our King's Indian setup. We knew this was a possibility, but we've got this overly defended, so not a big deal. The engine wants me to push this pawn and chase it away, but I'm not ready for that yet. I could have simply just castled, would have been totally fine. I got my king's pawn breaker up. Again, this is unnecessary move for right now. You only have to do it after your opponent pushes, but I got it there because this way I can get my knight into the game, and if I wanted to. If my opponent made a mistake and pushed this pawn, I was probably going to go ahead and... Actually, I probably should have done it right away to set myself up to weaken my opponent's kingside even more. But I like keeping the bishops on board as much as possible. Yeah, and the engine says taking with a bishop is better than taking with a pawn. Yeah, the engine really wants me to throw away the bishop, not throw away, to trade off this bishop, which isn't doing anything right now, for this knight, which also really isn't doing anything, but it would totally mess up my opponent's kingside structure even more. So I went for the pawn grab. I'm really surprised the evaluation shows that much of a difference. Maybe because the queen can swing over here and pick up and add a lot of with combination with the dark square bishop here, you know, pair up with that bishop, maybe. Right, there's a weakness there in front of the king, exploit it. Maybe that's why the engine evaluation is so high, but either way, we went for the pawn grab. Not the strongest move, but still decent enough. Yeah, I retreated the bishop too fast. I should have gone forward. Notice that rook is hanging, so my opponent doesn't have time to grab here, has to move there, and then sure I could grab, but I would probably retreat and not make that exchange. A fianchettoed bishop is super strong within this structure, so sitting in front of the king as long as I'm castled, that's a super strong piece, so I'm not ready to give it up for an undeveloped rook just yet. I should have, yeah, I just snapped this instantly. I should have thought about it a little bit harder. I mentioned it, but I should have thought about it. I should have gone for it. I chickened out. But we did notice, right, our opponent made a solid play. Remove the defender. What's this knight's job? This knight's job is defending that bishop. So we had to plan for that, and we did. Handled it all in stride. Yeah, now I could grab. Probably should have grabbed there as well. lots of opportunities to grab that pawn, and I never did. But I went for a... I don't know why I completely ignored all this. I mean, this was an easy free pawn I should have grabbed a long time ago. You know, your mind, one of my challenges that I constantly struggle with is tunnel vision. I just absolutely get tunnel vision on my plan at the time, and I forget all my other plans. Especially now, like, look at this, man, oh man, oh man. Because it comes, if you capture here, then I capture there, and it's an even trade. Well, it's an exchange up for black. Black is happy then. Yeah, and unfortunately, you could see my opponent just dropped, and and we calculated out, right? We spent the time, we calculated out that this was a safe maneuver. There was no risk in this position, and unfortunately, as a beginner, we all have to pay attention to alignment issues. This is just an alignment issue my opponent had. And that's, I mean, you could see the advantage here at this point in time is just way too great for white to overcome. So this is, I think, what my opponent was looking for. And then maybe like that. If I capture back, oh no, he was looking for this. And then some kind of capture fest where he gets to pick up a rook at the end of the line. Oh, but it's pinned, so it doesn't even work in that line. Oops. Oops, oops, oops. Anyway, this was an easy one. You know, GG to my opponent, unfortunately. I believe they just played too fast. I mean, you look at the clock. I used several minutes, and my opponent used none. So I think they just moved too fast, and especially a move like this, where you move a pawn, undefended a piece, and we jump on undefended pieces. So play solid chess. Let your opponents make a mistake, and you'll win more games than you think. And then, yeah, this is just cleanup. And I spent way too long on the cleanup. All right, guys. This was fun. We'll catch another one. Talk to you guys later. Bye.